said $7 million figure. That's for 388.
Yes, that's the amount. I have the data. That's coming from 6 different departments: agriculture, driver services, economic development, insurance revenue, Secretary of State's office. In total, the number of costs, or the amount of costs, is approaching $7 million, and this bill would basically kind of reduce the amount of required copies that they would have to make, and the required documentation that would be provided on a yearly basis. Now, I think it's very important to quickly note that some of that is going to be required. So we're not talking about reducing it by $7 million, but there's a lot of opportunity there when we're looking to save every penny.
Can you give us an idea of what would and would not be printed? I haven't had time to read the bill.
Well, it actually is enumerated at great length in the bill, and annual requirements to come out like on December 31st, if there's something that has to be printed in big stacks by a certain date.
These are some pretty prime examples right here.
Yeah, there you go.
Types of reports and things that actually are required to be printed, and we can get those online just as easy as we can.
Well, what about the legislature itself? I mean, every day I come into the House and the Senate, there's a big pack of stuff that I don't need because I look at it online. It's sitting there though, and I don't know that there's any more tangible representation of paper waste than sign and die.
That's exactly right.
Are there going to be changes in the General Assembly itself?
It's coming, I think, is the best. I'll defer. That's for sure.
Well, one of the steps that we just took is actually the journals will no longer be printed. The journals will actually be administered through an online service, and that will save the state, obviously, not a tremendous amount of money in the light of the $1.5 billion shortfall that we have. But it's, again, it is a process, and you don't turn the ship around overnight. State government is very, very large, but it is continuing to accelerate this effort of trying to embrace technology and utilize it to the fullest degree. Now, can we do a better job even on the Senate floor? Absolutely we can. And it's my hope that we will see one day very soon by which you could operate the entire chamber without having printed material and be utilizing it there with computer.
Travis, to your question, Section 2 of the bill, there's 5.5 pages of specifics on what exactly we're talking about.
Lieutenant Governor Cagle, a separate question. As you know, Governor Perdue has now proposed making 4 statewide elective offices appointed positions. Do you think this would help make government more efficient, cohesive?
Well, I think the governor's very sincere, obviously, in his, I think the governor's very sincere, obviously, in his effort to streamline and create maybe a larger cabinet. But there is a concern, a very growing concern across the General Assembly that this could be something that's moving too fast. And I think it'll be embraced in a much slower, methodical process. And and I don't think the governor's intent is to create a power grab, but there are those that feel that could be the perception associated with this. It's a pretty high hurdle to overcome. There's a lot of precedence that has been set, and the voters obviously have expressed their views many years with these constitutional officers, and so we'll be taking a very slow process as we begin analyzing the governor's bill.
Most states appoint these positions now. Do you think that makes sense for Georgia?
Well, I think the governor obviously does make a very strong philosophical argument that if you look at our peer groups, you have less constitutional officers and they're actually appointed. But Georgia has had a long history of allowing those constitutional officers to be elected. There's pros and cons, and those are the issues that we'll debate as the bill moves forward. But I would say that it's a high hurdle to overcome at this point.
You mentioned these two bills come out of the task force recommendations. Do we have other recommendations that the task force has released?
We are expecting those, the final meeting of the task force it will happen this week, and then we anticipate those recommendations in the following week. So very excited about some of those recommendations are going to be very controversial, I can tell you. But you know, it's all about streamlining government and making it more efficient, more effective, and more transparent. I mean, at the end of the day, that's what consumers and the citizens of our state are looking for. And we certainly want to ensure that we're being the best steward of the resource that we can be.
Senator Rogers, I was struck by your comment, you know, everything we do here ought to be in the open. Would you support repealing the exemption in the Open Records and Meetings Act that the Georgia General Assembly exists under?
I'd have to look at the law. I've never even studied that, but I mean.
Well, according to a judge's decision, the Georgia General Assembly does not count as a department or agency of state government, and therefore is not subject to the Open Records Act and the Open Meetings Act.
It'd be hard for me in this, without having listened to both sides, to make any comment on that.
Okay.
But clearly, when we're spending taxpayer dollars, which is really what open.ga.gov centers around, those taxpayer dollars need to be reviewed by the people who are paying the bills, and so we can certainly do that. And you know, a couple of years ago, on that whole topic of saving money, we talked about putting public notices online, and we did get some pushback there, but maybe it's something in the future we'll revisit again.
Anything else?
Governor, can I ask about, you know, the governor has just released the actual bill for merit pay, and I put this to anybody, that's such a big change on education in this state. If you could just comment on your thoughts on that. And you may have already spoken at length about it, and I just missed it. But.
No, I haven't. You know, we have, the governor and I have had a very brief conversation as it relates to merit pay. Obviously, I do philosophically am very supportive of the concept and the idea of moving towards an incentive process. The idea by which people simply get pay raises not based on performance but purely based on years of service or degrees is not necessarily a sound principle. But obviously the details of how you create a merit system that is based on performance is really what's in question. So philosophically, I think it's the right direction to go in. I want to be very supportive, but on the same token, it's an issue that you know, is going to have to be vetted, and many of those that are going to be impacted will have, you know, clearly have a seat at the table as we're trying to draft something that will be fair and equitable. The governor's plan is not necessarily focused on changing people in midstream, but giving them an option to convert to a pay-for-performance structure, and then moving public policy in this direction for new hires at a date certain. And so it would be a phase-in process, but much of the details still has to be worked out. Of course, the race to the top that the governor's been deeply involved in, and we've been supportive and helpful in that process. Much of this discussion is centered around that initiative, and you know, clearly we need to pay those that are going over and above a greater salary, and that's what you know, the American dream is all about. The harder you work, the more you make, and we want to make certain that people in state government have that same opportunity.